I knew something was wrong the moment I pulled into my driveway. There was an unfamiliar silver Mercedes parked where I usually leave my car, forcing me to park on the street. As I walked up the path to my grandmother's Victorian house, well, my house now, I could hear furniture being dragged across hardwood floors. My name is Marlo, and until today, I thought I had finally found my peace. It had been 6 months since Gran passed and left me her beloved home, and 3 months since Ethan and I moved in together. But apparently, the universe had other plans. I unlocked the front door with trembling hands and stepped into chaos. My mother-in-law Lorraine stood in the middle of my living room, directing her husband Harold like an orchestra conductor as he pushed my grandmother's antique settee across the floor. "Oh good, you're home early," Lorraine said without looking at me, her voice sharp as cut glass. "This room is absolutely dreadful. The feng shui is all wrong. Harold, move that settee to the bay window." I stood frozen in the doorway, watching as they systematically dismantled the room I'd preserved exactly as Gran had left it. The settee where she used to read to me as a child. The hand-knotted Persian rug she'd brought back from her travels. Even the family photos were being reorganized on the walls. "Where's Ethan?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "He gave us his key," Harold mumbled apologetically, still pushing furniture. "Said we could surprise you with a makeover." "Surprise," Lorraine added with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Really, dear, you can't expect to raise a family in such an outdated space. We're doing you a favor." My chest tightened. Raise a family? Ethan and I hadn't even discussed children yet. I watched as Lorraine picked up one of Gran's hand-painted vases, examining it with obvious distaste. "Please put that down," I said quietly. "It's very special to me." "Oh, don't be so precious about these old things," Lorraine replied, setting the vase aside with deliberate casualness. "Change is good for you. You'll thank me later." I pulled out my phone and texted Ethan, "Your parents are here. We need to talk." His response came quickly, "Sorry, stuck at work." Whatever mom suggests, just go with it. Easier that way. I looked up from my phone to see Lorraine watching me with that same calculating smile. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about furniture. This was a power play, and my mother-in-law had just made her first move. The question was, what would be mine? 3 days after the living room invasion, I decided to host a dinner party. Not because I wanted to, God knows I'd rather eat glass, but because Gran always said the best way to handle difficult people was to kill them with kindness. Though watching Lorraine inspect her water glass for spots, I was starting to question Gran's wisdom. "I noticed you kept all the old furniture," Lorraine said, running a finger along the edge of my grandmother's mahogany dining table. "Though I suppose some people find vintage charming." Ethan cleared his throat but kept his eyes on his plate. Harold, sitting beside him, seemed fascinated by his green beans. "It's not vintage, it's an heirloom," I replied, forcing a smile. "Speaking of which, I'd love to hear stories about your family pieces, Lorraine. What did your mother pass down to you?" The fork paused halfway to her mouth. For a split second, something flickered across her face, pain, maybe, but it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. "We're not sentimental about objects," she said crisply. "Ethan, darling, have you told Marlo about the lovely new development we discussed?" My husband's shoulders tensed. "Mom, not now. The Riverside property," she continued, ignoring him. "Perfect for a growing family. Much more suitable than this. Historical residence." I set down my wine glass harder than intended. "What Riverside property?" "Just a potential investment opportunity," Ethan mumbled. "Nothing definite." "Your father and I took him to see it last weekend," Lorraine added. 3 bedrooms, modern kitchen, excellent school district. "We've already spoken to our realtor friend about making an offer." The room tilted slightly. "Last weekend?" When Ethan said he was working late. "Excuse me," I managed, standing up. "I need to check on dessert." In the kitchen, I gripped the counter, trying to steady my breathing. Behind me, I heard footsteps, too heavy to be Lorraine's. "I'm sorry," Harold said quietly. "She means well, in her way." I turned to face my father-in-law. "Does she?" because it feels like she's trying to erase everything that matters to me. He fidgeted with his wedding ring. Lorraine. She's afraid of becoming irrelevant. When her own mother-in-law. He stopped abruptly, as if catching himself. Just try to understand. Before I could press him further, Lorraine's voice rang out from the dining room. Harold, come help me show Ethan those paint swatches I brought for the nursery. I watched Harold shuffle back to his wife, carrying what felt like the weight of unspoken secrets. What had he been about to say about Lorraine's mother-in-law? And why did I have the feeling that this dinner was just the beginning of a much bigger storm? After the disastrous dinner party, I found myself in Grand's study, seeking comfort in the familiar scent of old books and leather. The room was my sanctuary, the one place Lorraine hadn't managed to improve yet. I ran my fingers along the spines of Grand's beloved novels, stopping at a worn copy of Jane Eyre that seemed oddly out of place. When I pulled it out, an envelope fluttered to the floor. The paper had yellowed with age, and my hands trembled as I recognized Grand's elegant handwriting, for Lorraine Baxter, never sent. I shouldn't have read it. But after the past week, I felt entitled to some answers. Lorraine, the letter began, I write this knowing you'll never change. 20 years ago, you drove your mother-in-law from her home with your improvements and your subtle cruelties. Now I watch you attempting the same with my granddaughter. But Marlo is stronger than you know, and this house will never belong to you. My phone buzzed, Ethan calling, but I ignored it, my eyes glued to the page. The truth about Harold's mother's departure would destroy the image you've carefully constructed. Remember that before you push too far. The study door creaked open, making me jump. Harold stood there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I thought I might find you here, he said quietly. That letter. I've been waiting years for someone to find it. What happened to your mother? He sank into Grand's armchair, shoulders heavy. Lorraine told everyone Mom moved to Florida willingly. The truth is, she drove her away with constant criticism, rearranging her home, making decisions about our lives. Sound familiar? Why didn't you stop it? The same reason Ethan doesn't stop it now. He met my eyes. Cowardice. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Lorraine, coming by tomorrow to discuss nursery colors. Already ordered the wallpaper. Ethan agreed it's perfect. I looked at Harold, really looked at him, this broken man who'd spent decades watching history repeat itself. I'm not leaving, I said firmly. This ends with me. He nodded slowly. Be careful. Lorraine. When she feels threatened. He trailed off as footsteps echoed in the hallway. Harold? Lorraine's voice carried through the door. The car's running. He stood, hesitating. Your grandmother tried to warn us all. Don't let her letter be in vain. As I watched him shuffle out, I clutched Grand's letter like a shield. Lorraine wanted a war? Fine. But this time, she'd picked the wrong house and the wrong woman to try to control. She wants you to quit your job? Clara nearly spilled her coffee across the cafe table. Please tell me you're not considering it. I pushed my untouched muffin around its plate. Lorraine says it's about focusing on family priorities. She's already lined up 3 interviews with her friends' daycares. For a baby that doesn't exist yet? Clara's eyes narrowed. What does Ethan say about all this? Before I could answer, my phone lit up with Lorraine's name. I silenced it, but not before catching her text. Canceled your appointment with that awful career counselor. Lunch instead? How did she even know about that? I whispered, more to myself than Clara. The career counselor had been my secret hope for finding a better position at a larger firm. She's monitoring your calendar, isn't she? Clara leaned forward. The shared family one Ethan insisted you join? My stomach dropped. Of course. The calendar Ethan had pressed me to use, just for family stuff. I'd thought it was sweet at the time, him wanting to be more organized. Now I wondered whose idea it really was. I can't keep living like this, I said, pulling out my laptop. Watch this. I opened my work email, started typing a resignation letter. Clara grabbed my wrist. Don't you dare, she said. That's exactly what she wants. Your grandmother didn't leave you that house so you could let another Lorraine win. Another Lorraine? A new voice made us both jump. Harold stood beside our table, looking uncomfortable in his casual weekend clothes. Harold? What are you doing here? Getting coffee. He gestured vaguely toward the counter, then hesitated. Mind if I? I nodded, and he slid into the empty chair. I heard what you said about another Lorraine, he said quietly. You found the letter, didn't you? About my mother. Clara shot me a questioning look, but I kept my eyes on Harold. Why are you here, Harold? Really? He pulled out an envelope, placed it carefully between our coffee cups. Because history doesn't have to repeat itself. These are papers from when my mother sold her house, to Lorraine's name only. There's something you need to see about the terms. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. Mom says you're not answering. We need to talk about the house. She has some ideas about the deed. I looked at Harold's envelope, then at my phone, pieces clicking into place with terrible clarity. This wasn't just about controlling my life. Lorraine wanted my house, my grandmother's house, and she was using Ethan to get it. Show me everything, I said to Harold, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Every last detail. The annual Baxter family brunch was in full swing, our backyard filled with relatives I barely knew, all circling like vultures as Lorraine held court by the mimosa station. I'd spent the morning rearranging furniture back to its proper place after her latest improvement attempt, my hands still shaking with quiet rage. Everyone. Lorraine clinked her glass. I have an announcement. My stomach clenched. Beside me, Harold wouldn't meet my eyes. As you know, Ethan and Marlo have been blessed with this lovely historic home, she began, her smile sharp as broken glass. And since they'll be starting a family soon, we've decided it's time for some major renovations. I nearly dropped my plate. We've decided? The contractors start Monday, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. We're thinking of converting that dusty old study into a proper nursery. No need for all those books taking up space. The study. Grand sanctuary. Where her letters still sat hidden in Jane Eyre. No. The word came out louder than I intended. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Excuse me? Lorraine's voice dropped dangerously low. I said no. I stepped forward, feeling dozens of eyes on me. You don't get to decide anything about this house. Not the study, not the furniture, not my future children. Marlo, Ethan warned, reaching for my arm. I shook him off. Tell them, Lorraine. Tell them what you did to Harold's mother's house. Tell them why she really moved to Florida. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're... Or should we discuss the deed transfer papers you're trying to pressure Ethan into signing? The ones Harold showed me? A glass shattered somewhere. Harold stood up suddenly, knocking over his chair. You're making a scene, Lorraine hissed. This is hardly the behavior of someone capable of maintaining a household of this caliber. Perhaps if you focus less on your career and more on proper family values. Proper family values? I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears. Like manipulating your son? Driving away anyone who stands up to you? This ends now, Lorraine. This is my house. My life. And you're not welcome in either anymore. Ethan, she snapped. Control your wife. But when I turned to look at my husband, he was already walking away, disappearing into the house without a word. The silence that followed was deafening. Lorraine's face twisted into something almost pitying. Well, she said softly, I suppose we all see who's really destroying this family. As relatives began awkwardly gathering their things, I stood my ground, Gran's words from her letter echoing in my mind. Marlo is stronger than you know. I just hoped she was right. I found Ethan in our bedroom, methodically packing a suitcase. The party's voices still drifted up from the backyard, but they felt distant, like sounds from another world. So that's it? I asked, watching him fold his shirts with mechanical precision. You're choosing her? I'm choosing peace, he replied without looking up. Maybe if you'd tried harder to understand Mom's perspective. Understand? I grabbed the deed transfer papers from my dresser, throwing them onto his perfectly folded clothes. Like how you understood when you agreed to sign over my house to her? That made him pause. It wasn't like that. She just wanted to protect the family's interests. The family's interests? My laugh sounded hollow. Tell that to Harold's mother. Tell that to Gran, who knew exactly what Lorraine was capable of. You don't know everything, Marlo. His voice hardened. Mom's been through things you can't understand. Then help me understand, Ethan. For once in your life, stand up and tell the truth. He zipped his suitcase closed, the sound final as a coffin lid. The truth is, you're the one who's torn this family apart. Not Mom. You. The words hit like a physical blow. As he brushed past me, I grabbed his arm. Where are you going? To my parents. Mom's already called a lawyer about the house. He finally met my eyes. It's over, Marlo. You've lost. After he left, I stood in our bedroom, my bedroom now, listening to his car start up and drive away. My phone buzzed with a text from Lorraine. The contractors will still arrive Monday. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I walked downstairs in a daze, finding Harold still sitting alone in the empty backyard. He looked up as I approached, his eyes full of decades of regret. I tried to warn you, he said softly. Why didn't you ever stand up to her? The same reason Ethan won't. Sometimes it's easier to surrender than fight a war you can't win. He stood slowly. Lorraine. She doesn't just take houses, Marlo. She takes pieces of your soul until there's nothing left to fight with. As he walked away, I noticed something on the table, the key to their house. The one they'd given us for emergencies. Beside it lay a small notebook I recognized from Harold's desk. I picked up both, my hands trembling. The notebook fell open to a recent entry. The truth about what really happened to Mother is in the attic boxes. I should have spoken up years ago. Maybe now. Looking at my grandmother's house, my house, I realized this wasn't just about protecting a building anymore. It was about breaking a cycle that had destroyed too many lives already. I clutched the key tighter. Lorraine wanted a war? Fine. But first, I needed to know exactly what kind of enemy I was fighting. The Baxter's attic was a maze of cardboard boxes and forgotten memories. Using Harold's key to break in felt wrong, but I was past caring about right and wrong. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Ethan and a text from Lorraine. The movers arrive tomorrow. Don't make me involve the police. I was halfway through another dusty box when I found it, a false bottom hiding a stack of yellowed papers. Hospital records. Court documents. Letters. I wondered when you'd come looking. I spun around. Lorraine stood in the attic doorway, her silhouette sharp against the dim light. Your mother-in-law, I said, holding up the papers. She didn't move to Florida. She was committed to a psychiatric facility. She was unstable. Lorraine stepped closer, refusing to accept change, causing scenes. Rather like you. Because you gaslight her. Made her think she was losing her mind when she tried to protect her home. My hands shook as I read from the admission papers. Patient exhibits paranoid behavior, claims daughter-in-law is systematically destroying her life. I protected this family, Lorraine snapped. Harold's mother was weak. Ethan's chosen someone equally weak. History repeats itself. Is that what you tell yourself? That destroying people is protection. Something flickered across her face, pain, maybe even fear. You don't understand. My own mother-in-law took everything from me. My home, my voice, my dignity. I swore I'd never be powerless again. So you became her? Destroying other women to feel strong? I became a survivor. She reached for the papers, but I stepped back. Give those to me. No. I pulled out my phone, showed her the recording icon. It's over, Lorraine. Harold's confession about his mother, your admission just now, it's all here. Try to take my house and these records go public. She went very still. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? You taught me well, survival at any cost, right? For a moment, I saw something crack in her perfect facade. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a hollow, tired sound. You're right, she said quietly. I did become her. And now you're becoming me. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. I looked down at the papers in my hands, at the evidence of lives destroyed by fear and control, and made my decision. I deleted the recording. I'm not becoming you, I said, holding out the papers. Because I'm choosing to break the cycle. Take them. But stay away from my home and get help, Lorraine. Before you lose everyone who matters. As I walked away, leaving her alone in the attic with her secrets, I felt lighter. Sometimes the best revenge isn't winning the war, it's refusing to fight it in the first place. A month after the attic confrontation, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a familiar key and a letter in Lorraine's precise handwriting. I've started therapy. Harold's mother is being transferred to a facility closer to home. Some cycles are meant to be broken. I was replanting Gran's roses when Ethan pulled into the driveway. He looked different, older somehow, or maybe just more present. "The divorce papers are signed," he said, staying by his car. "I've been seeing someone too. A therapist, I mean. Trying to understand why I never learned to stand up for anything." I nodded, continuing to work the soil. "Good. Mom's different," he added quietly. "Dad says she's actually talking about her own mother-in-law now. About patterns and trauma and, well, everything she never faced before." The autumn air carried the scent of earth and dying leaves. In the study window above us, I could see the reflection of Gran's reading lamp, still burning where it always had. "I'm not coming back," Ethan said suddenly. "I need to learn who I am without everyone else's expectations. But I wanted you to know you were right to fight. For this house, for yourself. I'm sorry I never fought beside you." After he left, I went up to Gran's study. The contractors never came, and Lorraine's lawyers never called. The room remained exactly as it had been, filled with books and memories and quiet strength. On Gran's desk, I found one last surprise, a journal I'd never seen before, bookmarked with a faded photograph. It showed a young woman standing proudly in front of this very house, her face bright with determination. On the back was written, "To my granddaughter Marlo, remember, a home is not just walls and windows. It's the courage to protect what matters, and the wisdom to know when to let go. Some battles are won not by fighting, but by breaking the chains that bind us to old wounds." The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Clara holding up takeout bags and wine. Behind her, surprisingly, stood Harold, clutching what looked like old photo albums. I took one last look at Gran's photo before heading downstairs. The house felt different now, not just mine, but a sanctuary for healing, for breaking cycles, for new beginnings. As I opened the door to my unexpected guests, I remembered Lorraine's words in the attic. History repeats itself. Maybe she was right. But not in the way she'd thought. Sometimes history repeats to give us a chance to write a better ending. And this time, we all chose differently.